adding after the shows. I wanted to offer my guests the chance to read from their books and for you a chance to hear them do that. And maybe even if you have a question, I can host a chat here. If you write something down, I might be able to ask Morgan. I'm going to have to plant some people, Morgan, so that we get questions on this. Why not? They do it in Hollywood. We can do it here in Newfoundland. Anyway, we were talking to Morgan about Dirty Birds, and that's his book. There it is. That's the cover his wife designed, but all the artwork inside is Morgan's. And actually quite a good artist, with pen and ink, I'm thinking it is.
Oh, it's actually with iPad and iPencil.
Oh, well, hey, I mean, get with the times, Catherine. And you know what? If the NHL thing doesn't work out and you've always got a third career you can go back on. And but anyway, I'm going to be quiet and let you read, and then I will come back at the end and we'll have another little chat. So everyone out there, I hope you enjoy this. This is Morgan Murray reading from his book, Dirty Birds. Take it away, Morgan.
All right. So I'll just catch everybody up. I'm going to read from chapter 6, Spectacle des Oeufs. Milton has just met the love of his... Let me start at the start. Milton, Ontario, not to be confused with Milton, Ontario, the city, is the protagonist of the novel. He's kind of a wet rag of a human being. I describe him as the most beige, average, normal, ordinary person you'd ever meet. But he gets it in his head that he's going to become a famous poet and ladies' man like his hero Leonard Cohen. So he moves from his parents' basement in rural Saskatchewan, a little town called Bellybutton, and goes to the big city in Montreal to become this poet. His first official night in Montreal, he goes to a anarchist potluck, and he meets Robin, who becomes the love of his life. And so I'm just going to read after the potluck is over and he's all smitten. He doesn't have her number or anything, and he's trying to find her. So this section is called Cherchez la femme. The next few weeks blurred together into a rash of long nights that bled into early mornings that ended with Milton curled up under a ratty towel and his winter coat, with a ball of dirty laundry for a pillow on a bare, filthy, fifth or sixth hand mattress in his windowless room. He tagged along with Naughty or Georgette or Rudy or Ava to every house party and potluck, every secret music show of bands no one had ever heard of, every pay what you can fringe festival, vaudeville, burlesque extravaganza, every art student term project exhibition, every free first Tuesday of the month at Musée des Beaux-Arts, every free second Wednesday of the month at Musée d'Art Contemporain, every half-off showing of Elephant Man at Cinema du Parc, every poetry reading at every out-of-the-way St. Henri Freegan Co-op coffee shop, every 2-drink minimum open mic bilingual comedy night and dive bars in Notre Dame de Grace, every work acquaintance's bowling birthday party in the far-flung banlieue, or entire nights spent wandering from 8.5 to 8.5 pre-drinking parties that never happened. To the outsider, it looked like he was being social and having the time of his life, becoming fully immersed in the underemployed Anglophone Bohemian art student expat caste, mixing with the thousands of normcore asymmetric haircut GTA refugees, and the usual bit of alcoholism that goes along with it. But really, it was all just an ongoing search for Robin. Not that he ever needed help nor excuse to imagine impossible happily ever afters for himself and the unsuspecting subjects of his infatuation, but the intense regime of sleeping all day and going out all night, the endless unoccupied and unencumbered hours, the lack of any responsibility whatsoever, the vacuum of obligation, connection, and preoccupation that his life had become was filled almost entirely, as it had been by Ashley's for most of his childhood, with daydreaming of, with fantasizing about, with obsessing over Robin. Well, out at the 100 different variations of the bemused late-onset teenagers moping about in coffee shops and bars and art galleries and Leninist bike repair shop, co-op, noise band, concert venues, and underfurnished living rooms and kitchens, he was always watching the door or checking over his shoulder or approaching chestnut-haired girls with their backs turned. While at home, when he wasn't sleeping off the night before, he filled pages and pages of cheap paper from the Greek papeterie with brooding, lovesick poems that swung between enraptured and enraged, depending on how cold the trail for his unrequited new true love had been the night before. He'd only ever met her the one time, at the anarchist Freegan potluck in the vermin abattoir. They talked. She was engaged, but slightly aloof, cold even. She traveled in and out of conversations with Milton. There were moments he was sure they were plumbing their deepest depths in a way that welds two souls together, and at other moments where she didn't seem to give a bleep. And others yet when she was drunker and higher and called him a poet and meant it, and touched his shoulder and maybe meant it, and others still when she laughed at him for being a poet, for being in the same room as her, for being on that curb beside her in front of that dep in that run-down neighborhood at that late hour of that early morning, dumpster borscht, bathtub brandy, and cheap cigarello on her breath, her eyes glassy and distant, on the run from imaginary police after imaginary firecracker firefights. He replayed every moment of that entire night over and over. He rehearsed better things to say in conversations that happened weeks ago. He mulled over the meaning of every look, of every inadvertent touch, of every joke made at his expense that no one laughed at. Was it contempt or curiosity, or maybe even connection behind the teasing? Did she feel it too? Was she lying on a bed of broken springs and mysterious stains, fully clothed for warmth, staring into the darkness where an odd-shaped hole in the paint was, wondering what he was doing just then? Wondering if he was wondering too? Of course not. She didn't care. She went to Oxford. She dropped out of Oxford because she's above that. She spent 3 years in a Calcutta dump filming seagulls for a 7-minute, mostly silent black and white film about seagulls in a Calcutta dump. Not a film of Calcutta dump seagulls that was a metaphor for anything, not a suggestion of anything, just dump birds for their own sake, she swore. An honest to God, earnest to Jesus, meditation on dump birds. She hung around real artists who made real art. She argued loudly about the merits of her friend's papier-mâché art pieces. I won't spoil that part for you. She didn't hide. She was perfect and real and immediate and present. If you bored her, her eyes told you so. Her body told you so. Her mouth told you so. Her getting up mid-sentence and walking outside to smoke with Where's Waldo told you so. There were no airs or pretense or BS. She didn't hide behind a veil of irony and sarcasm and disconnected smartassery like everyone else trying to be someone else, trying to be poets, trying to be artists. She was an artist, a maker, a creator, not a critic, a pretender, a hanger-on, a faker, a hater. She was so sure of everything she did and everything she said. She was a goddess. She was beautiful. Her eyes, her cheeks, her hips, her lips, the faint curves, so much more hiding under the old military surplus winter jacket you wore that night. She was perfect. And this is a poem that Milton wrote about that. The wind blew you next to me. I could feel your soul when you blew your smoke in my face as a joke. That night we met, that night we fell into the well of your eyes, your heart of forever. So Milton's not a very good poet. She was cruel. She asked Milton to open up, to share his insecurity and deepest secrets, to share his poems, his art, his soul. And what did she offer him in return? A tease, a touch on the shoulder, a face full of cigarella smoke. How dare she? That name, this is more poetry, is not my name. My name is not Millhouse. That is a much more lame than Milton. The poem is really bad. I'll stop there. So that's on Cherchez la Femme.
Oh man, he had it bad. That's what they say. And she was pretty much not impressed.
Not really.
And we got to hear a bit of Milton's poetry. He was no Leonard Cohen, although it did seem to improve a bit through the book. Would you say?
Well, I found out that writing bad poetry is kind of hard. So I went back and I loathe to admit this to anyone, but here I am. I went back and found some of the poetry I was writing when I was living in Montreal as a 23-year-old dummy, and it was bad. And so I just put that in the book.
There's a truth no one knew. I love that. Oh my goodness. You know, what I like to, I did a year in Quebec City after I finished university, because I too couldn't figure out what to do with an arts degree. And I thought, well, I'll learn French, and that ought to be helpful. And actually I got more jobs from my French. Yeah, it was always a shoe-in on work, having having that capacity to speak and read French and so on. And so I like those little parts of the book, and it brought some memories back to me. I went to many parties in the old part of Quebec City, into these less than beautiful apartments with these high ceilings and sparse and sketchy furnishings, and some really strange rituals of people lighting alcohol on fire and swallowing it. And I know, I can't say what that was called. It was called a flaming, and it begins with A, the next part of that description. And I danced my head off at Vendredi 13, which was this big dance hall down in Quebec. So part of when I'm reading Milton, I'm reliving some of those feelings and experiences when I'm reading about, what he was, that part of his life in Montreal. And I'm like, yeah, I get the sense of that. I really do. You did it. You caught it.
It was my intention to learn French as well. And Montreal's not a great place to learn French because everyone will just speak English at you. That's
right. You got to get into the bowels of it. You got to go to Quebec City like I did. And also I went to Trois-Rivières.
Well, there you go.
One of my assignments was to take a tape recorder, go to the mall, interview one of the old geezers, and understand it. So put it this way, if I gave that to someone coming to Newfoundland and said, go down to whatever, Norman's Tickle, here's your tape recorder, interview them, and they're French, and tell me what they said, not a hope.
Yeah, I did a French immersion program in Chicoutimi up in northern Quebec, and it was the same thing. That it was like trying to learn English around the Bay of Newfoundland. It was impossible.
Not easy. Not easy, the speed and the accent and so on. But, that was really enjoyable. Thank you so much for sharing that reading with us and for giving us a bit of insight into Milton's pain with Robin. And read the book to find out what happens. I love the fact that you got a bit of romance in there. There's not a good book if there's not some romance. Morgan, I'm a romance writer. There's got to be a bit of that. Anyway, thank you so much. Now we're going to jump over on Instagram, and I'll see you in a minute there. And any questions come in? No, I'm obviously going to have to plant people. And but that's it. I'm after blowing up my screen here on the Apple, and I'll see if I can get out of this gracefully and find the button. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Bye for now, everyone, and thanks for tuning in, and thank you so much, Morgan.